So there are a number of games I enjoy, primarily distributed by Devolver Digital. These are mainly but not exclusively 2D games, either top-down or side-scrolling, which is in line with the general trend of these types of games. But what has got me thinking is why I and others enjoy these games so much despite their obvious limitations in a 2D space. Part of the reason for this could be nostalgia, but I'm not in the camp of nostalgia. As a child I experienced and enjoyed such games, but it's not something I look back in any particular way. Also, during this time 3D was growing and overshadowing 2D games, with new experiences and possibilities. What I have concluded is a couple of things. In recent years there have been a number of low-cost game engines with decreased learning curves and or easier interfaces to learn. This has made production easier, especially for 2D games, allowing smaller teams. This structure has given rise, in my opinion, to greater freedom and creativity, but also more importantly an emphasis on gameplay that comes with less focus on graphic fidelity. But another factor which is, in my opinion, also important is the way physics have been employed within these games. This is a new factor, not something from the past, because this was not feasible back then given the limitations of the technology at the time. So although yes, the graphics are dated and from another era, the physics are not. The physics in these games are thoroughly modern in my opinion, and have therefore given in part a new lease of life to the 2D games. In other words, this has changed the gameplay in some way, making it more modern to some degree. Let me explain further. Using new modern physics within the game engine with its 2D environment allows for the development of new types of movement within that field. For example, new types of interaction and action to occur, which in turn require certain inputs or skills from the player. Within the limitations of 2D graphics, this is very much doable with a small team. So although there are limitations in terms of graphics, the gameplay is sort of the opposite. It's been expanded in part through the use of the physics engine. Gameplay is what matters in my opinion. Graphics and art design are important, especially in terms of immersion, but gameplay is why we play these sorts of games, and that's what it's primarily about. Also, although I may say that the graphic fidelity is dated, that doesn't mean that I dislike the art design in any way. In fact, in most of these examples I feel the art direction has been pretty good and aided in setting the mood or tone of the game setting. This might further a case for art direction in games over graphic fidelity, but this can lead to a game becoming dated faster. In my view, this emphasis and expansion of gameplay creates games that are very engaging and enjoyable in my opinion. They bring to the forefront aspects in gaming that I feel are somewhat neglected, such as skill and movement, timing, enemy prioritization and resource management, etc. This requires effort which provides immense satisfaction when accomplished. Here are examples where I have noticed how physics affects both movement but more specifically the player's acceleration and deceleration. If we look at Carry On, it's a simple 2D game, side-scrolling, but then you look at the way you are able to move your character around the whole space, which was not possible before say the 8 or 16-bit era. You have free movement of your character and are able to move freely to all parts of the level more quickly in a smooth and fast fashion. In this case it creates a whole new way of controlling your character, and with that a flow to the game and gameplay not otherwise seen in a 16-bit era game. This here is an example in my opinion of physics altering the gameplay. Another example would be Oli Oli. Again, another side-scrolling game here. The key to this is movement and timing of input. This requires focus on timing and how precise you are when executing a move. This is affected in part because there is a sense of acceleration and deceleration of the physics of the game. As well as giving a flow to the action, it also adds to your need to be precise with your input. In other words, this game requires greater skill because of the need to be more precise. Another example can be seen in Hotline Miami. This is a top-down game where there is a speed and flow to your character as well as the enemies you encounter. Again, here, this creates a need for pacing and timing. The fun and skill of this game comes from the prioritization of enemies, their position, movement, etc. Again, this depends on skill and the satisfaction of accomplishment, but this is only possible because of the player and the enemy's ability to have free movement uninterrupted in the game. It is this factor of the physics that allows this skill base to occur in my opinion. If you observe Limbo, side-scrolling level design, which is very basic, but puzzles are key to the game. Again, here the physics are the basis to the puzzles being carried out and being challenging and skill-based. There is a reliance upon swinging and movement of objects. There is a sense of acceleration/deceleration, which is key to this movement, and you being precise requiring you to have the skill to do so. The physics have obviously played a role in terms of being the basis of the unique puzzles in the game. They have therefore, in my opinion, enabled the choice of level design being simpler. Enter the Gungeon. This game has a nice dodge rolling mechanic. It's a smooth, uninterrupted movement. This is only one mechanic which I have picked up on in the game, but this allows an expansion and variation of movement and flexibility. Therefore more possibilities about how you encounter and dodge the enemies is possible. This all combined with the prioritization of enemy types and obstacles creates a lot of variation within the gameplay. Luftrausers. This is an incredibly simple game. No real level design at all. A lot of this comes to variation and layering of different enemy types. But again, this rolls around movement and you being able to smoothly move and change direction in a precise manner. So in conclusion, the physics give 2D games a new dimension to its gameplay. Again, this is only a component to the whole picture of good game design, but the physics have allowed for the expansion of the scope of gameplay and gameplay mechanics in my opinion. It puts an emphasis on gameplay, and gameplay is what matters the most in my opinion. It helps smaller teams make games, as I have mentioned before. This in turn allows for new or riskier ideas to be brought out and tried. It allows for greater experimentation. It also gives smaller teams a starting point for making games, from which they can then move on to make bigger projects, which is something that gives promise for the future.